Overcomplicating logic with nested conditions. Why it's an issue. As workflows grow in complexity, it's easy to rely on multiple nested conditions, if statements, to account for various scenarios. However, deeply nested conditions create a tangled structure that is hard to follow, manage, and debug. With each additional layer of conditions, the flow becomes more difficult to maintain and understand, especially when it comes time to troubleshoot or modify it in the future. Misplaced or incorrect conditions can easily result in logical errors that are time-consuming to identify and fix. Moreover, excessive nesting can also reduce the readability of your flow, making it challenging for others, or even yourself after some time, to quickly comprehend the flow's intent and functionality. This creates potential for inefficiencies and errors, especially as the flow scales. Best practices for managing complex conditions. Simplify the logic with smaller steps. Break down complex, nested conditions into smaller, more manageable actions. Instead of using a series of if conditions that depend on each other, separate the logic into discrete actions that each handle a simpler task. This not only makes the flow more readable, but also reduces the risk of mistakes in logic. Example: instead of creating a nested structure where each condition checks for multiple variables, create individual conditions that evaluate one factor at a time, leading to cleaner and more understandable logic. Use switch cases for multiple conditions. Power Automate provides a switch action, which allows you to evaluate a single expression against multiple possible values. This method can replace multiple if conditions, making the flow more organized and less prone to error. Example: if you need to check a status field for values like new, in progress, or completed, a switch action would be much cleaner and easier to maintain than multiple if conditions. Implement parallel branching. Instead of nesting conditions that need to run concurrently, leverage parallel branching to execute multiple branches simultaneously. Parallel branches can handle different conditions or actions concurrently, improving flow clarity and efficiency. Example: if your flow involves sending emails or performing other actions based on multiple conditions, use parallel branches to handle those tasks independently, rather than nesting them within each other. Keep conditions simple and specific. Avoid using overly broad or vague conditions that complicate the logic. Instead, make sure each condition is as clear and specific as possible to avoid unnecessary nesting. Additionally, consider refactoring complex conditions that overlap into simpler, more straightforward alternatives. Example: rather than creating a series of nested if conditions to check for various combinations of field values, create a more concise structure by checking the most important factor first and separating the conditions based on clear and specific criteria. Opt for reusable components. If your conditions or logic are recurring across different flows, consider creating a child flow or reusable logic components. This keeps your main flow cleaner, as you can offload complex conditions or logic to separate reusable flows. Example: create a child flow that handles specific conditions, e.g., determining whether an item meets a certain approval threshold, and call it from your main flow. Document your conditions thoroughly. When working with multiple conditions, ensure you provide clear documentation within your flow. Use descriptive names for variables, actions, and conditions to make the purpose of each step easily understandable. Adding comments where necessary can also provide clarity on the logic and make future troubleshooting or changes more straightforward. Example: use descriptive names like check order status or evaluate employee eligibility, and add comments to explain the intended purpose of each condition or decision branch. Key takeaways: deeply nested conditions complicate your flow, making it harder to maintain and debug. Break down complex conditions into simpler steps to improve readability and reduce errors. Use switch cases, parallel branching, and reusable components to streamline logic and avoid excessive nesting. Document your conditions clearly and maintain organized, descriptive flows for easier troubleshooting and long-term maintenance.